This lesson is a fairly detailed introduction to the parts of speech, what they are and how they are used in English. It is possible to learn English without being able to classify words and describe the properties of the classes they belong to. But if you want to understand grammar books or your teacher's explanations about the English language, then the knowledge you will gain in this lesson will be useful. Before listing the parts of speech, it's important to note that most modern grammarians prefer the term word class to part of speech. Other alternative terms include grammatical category and lexical category. I will continue to use part of speech in this lesson as the term is more common in English language teaching. But there will be many occasions when it feels more natural to use the word class. Traditionally, English was analysed as having 8 parts of speech. These are nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. This classification system was based on the analysis of Latin and ancient Greek. Most English language teaching materials for native speakers have used this analysis. For example, a popular US English textbook, Warrener's English Grammar and Composition. Later, some grammarians removed the articles from the adjective class and made them a class in their own right. So now, if you Google the question, how many parts of speech does English have, you will get many pages saying that there are 8 and many saying that there are 9. Here is an extract from a Google search. Recent increases in computing power, together with huge databases of natural language, have allowed linguists to perform more refined analyses of the English language. This has led to English words being sorted into a somewhat different set of classes. Unfortunately, there is currently no consensus on the number and names of those classes and which words should go in them. This slide shows the disagreement among 3 recent authoritative English descriptive grammars. You will see that there is no articles class here. These modern grammarians categorise the articles as a subclass of what they call determiners or determinatives. In this lesson, I will focus on the 8 traditional classes plus the new determiner class that includes the articles. I will go through the classes from largest to smallest, starting with nouns. But first, it's important to discuss how to talk about the parts of speech in a way that makes it easy to differentiate among them. Imagine someone asked you, what is the difference between a noun and a verb? How would you answer? Many people would say something like, a noun is the name of a thing, person or place. And a verb is a doing word. Here is ChatGPT's more detailed answer to the question. Pause the video to read what it says. Both the common man-in-the-street answer and ChatGPT's answer differentiate between nouns and verbs semantically. Grammarians also say notionally. In other words, by their respective meanings or by what they refer to in the real world. This is also how standard and learner dictionaries typically define the parts of speech. For example, the slide shows how the Collins Co-Build English Dictionary defines a noun. Linguists and grammatical dictionaries, however, base their definitions of the various parts of speech primarily on their functions or functional properties. Here is an extract from the definition of noun in a dictionary of linguistics. It defines noun according to its function as a word that can occur as the subject or object of a verb or the object of a preposition, can be modified by an adjective, can be used with a determiner. Linguistic dictionaries may also describe the different parts of speech according to their formal properties. Note that the word formal here does not refer to formality, such as the language difference between a formal governmental report and an informal email to a friend. When linguists talk about the formal properties of a part of speech, They are referring to what most people would call spelling. For example, the 5 forms of the verb to see are see, sees, seeing, saw, and seen. And here are examples of the forms of various nouns in the plural and the genitive. Changes in the form of nouns, verbs, adjectives, and pronouns are called inflections. And the grammatical topic of word structure, formation, and change is called morphology. We have looked so far at dictionary definitions of the various parts of speech and how they can be differentiated, semantically, functionally, and formally. Grammarians such as Arts in Oxford Modern English Grammar have a further way of differentiating, namely by what they call the distributional properties of the part of speech in question. Arts states, "We need to define the word classes by looking at the company words keep, the way they behave syntactically in clauses." In simpler terms, the distributional properties of a part of speech refer to the ways in which words of that particular part of speech are typically located in relation to the other parts of speech in a clause. The general topic of word placement and word order is called syntax. Because function and distribution, syntax, are closely linked, they will usually be treated together in the analyses that follow. 2 of the definitional approaches discussed above are the distributional approach and the formal approach. In the distributional approach, for example, we note the 2 possible positions of adjectives. Firstly, preceding the noun, as in the small dog, and secondly, as the complement following the copula to be, as in the dog is small. In the formal definitional approach, we note that many adjectives form their comparatives by adding the suffix r or er, for example, smaller. But these distributional and formal characteristics are not true of all adjectives. Some adjectives are usually only used attributively, that is, before the noun, and others only predictively, as a complement. And some adjectives do not form their comparative by adding the suffix r or er, nor indeed can many adjectives even be used comparatively at all. Similarly, not all nouns are pluralized by adding an s, and many nouns have no sensible plural form. Grammarians use the word prototype for those words that have all the distributional and formal characteristics of their particular part of speech. So small is a prototypical adjective and cat is a prototypical noun. Asleep and luck, on the other hand, are not prototypes. Asleep cannot be used attributively or comparatively, and luck cannot be pluralized. The analysis that follows will make generalizations about the prototypes in each word class. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. So, as we've seen, the parts of speech are most fully described and differentiated from one another by a combination of the 4 definitional approaches, namely by their meaning, by their function and distributional or syntactic properties, and by their changes of form, that is, inflections. The following analysis will include firstly information based on each of the 4 definitional or descriptive approaches as they apply to the prototypes of those classes. Secondly, each part of speech analysis will list its major subclasses together with exemplifying sentences. And thirdly, there will be a discussion of a prototypical example of that particular word class in a sentence. The parts of speech will be covered here in decreasing order of frequency based on their occurrence in 2 major corpora of written and spoken language. These are the BNC, the British National Corpus 2014, and the COCA, the Corpus of Contemporary American English. Note that both corpora list modal verbs as a separate part of speech. I will touch on this issue in the analysis of verbs below. The most common part of speech by far is the noun class. As we've seen above, nouns can be defined semantically as words that refer to people, places, things, or ideas. They can be defined functionally, distributionally, as a class of words that can be the subject, object, or complement of a verb. They are the head of noun phrases and can pre-modify other nouns, that is, function as an adjective. Finally, nouns can be defined formally as words that can be pluralized, usually by adding an S, and made possessive with an apostrophe plus S in the singular. No grammarians dispute nouns as a word class, but some include the personal pronouns as a subset of nouns, as their function and distribution is identical. There are many ways to classify nouns. The most common subsets are common, countable, uncountable, proper, concrete, abstract, collective, mass, and compound. The last set of examples, attributive nouns, show the use of nouns modifying nouns. In other words, nouns functioning as adjectives. Note that verbal nouns are commonly called gerunds. A final formal note about nouns is that they can be derived from other parts of speech and identified as nouns by common suffixes. Here are several examples. The noun to be analysed is trees in two trees in my garden have died. Trees in this sentence can be defined semantically as the name of a thing, functionally as the subject of the sentence, and distributionally as the head of the noun phrase two trees. A formal description notes that the noun has an S ending indicating a plural. Trees in this sentence is a member of the common, concrete, and countable noun subsets. Finally, here are example sentences containing nouns in the major subsets. The second most common part of speech is the verb class. Verbs can be defined semantically as doing or being words, that is, referring to an action or state. They can be defined functionally, distributionally as the essential word in the predicate to convey information about the subject and connect the subject to its object or complement. A formal description of verbs notes that they inflect for tense and aspect. For example, the verb eat becomes ate in the past tense and eating in the continuous aspect. Most analyses have verbs as a single class in their own right, but some grammarians, such as Enley, think that the differences between lexical verbs, such as eat, and what he calls primary verbs, that is, the auxiliary verbs do, be, and have, are sufficiently great that the latter merits its own separate category. As with nouns, there are numerous ways to subclassify verbs. The most common subsets are transitive, intransitive, regular, irregular, modal, auxiliary, copular, phrasal, stative, durative, dynamic, catenative, and reflexive. Many of these subsets intersect in various ways. So, for example, all modal verbs are catenative verbs, but not all catenative verbs are modal verbs. The verb to be analysed is played in I played tennis after school. Played in this sentence can be defined semantically as a doing word and functionally as the main word in the predicate connecting the subject of the sentence, I, to its object, tennis. A formal description notes that the verb is a finite verb with an ed ending indicating the past tense. Played in this sentence is a member of the regular, transitive and dynamic verb subsets. Finally, here are example sentences containing verbs in some of the major subsets. Adjectives are commonly defined semantically as describing or defining words. They refer to the qualities or characteristics of nouns and pronouns. A functional definition is that they complement or modify nouns, either attributively or predictively. Distributionally, they typically come between determiners and nouns. Adjectives can be defined formally or structurally as being subject to inflections that denote their comparative and superlative forms. They display common prefixes such as un, dis, trans, and common suffixes such as full, able, ible, ish. Adjectives are an undisputed part of speech, although in some classifications, articles and other determiners are included in the adjectives class. Adjectives can be subclassified in various ways. Examples include gradable, non-gradable, predictive and attributive, predictive only, attributive only, postpositive, compound, evaluative, participial, and absolute. The adjective to be analysed here is faster in I need a faster computer. Faster in the sentence can be defined semantically as a describing word and functionally as modifying the noun computer. Its distribution is attributive. That is, it precedes the noun. A formal description notes that the adjective has an ER ending indicating a comparative. Faster in the sentence is a member of the gradable and predictive and attributive adjective subsets. Finally, here are example sentences containing adjectives in the major subsets. Adverbs are commonly defined semantically as words of place, time, degree, and manner. Their primary function is to modify or describe verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. In terms of distribution, they can appear in various positions in a clause in relation to the clause elements that they modify. A formal description of adverbs would note that most of them do not inflect. The very few exceptions are those adverbs that have the same form as their corresponding adjective. For example, fast, hard, high, and near, whose comparative and superlative inflections are also identical to their adjective equivalents, faster, fastest, etc. Of course, adverbs of manner ending in ly, such as quickly, need more and most for their comparative and superlative forms. Adverbs are an undisputed part of speech, but words which cannot be indisputably allocated to any of the other word classes are often put into the adverb class without fulfilling the semantic or functional distributional criteria. This has led to adverbs being called the dustbin class. For example, by David Crystal in the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language. Adverbs can be subclassified semantically as adverbs of manner, time, frequency, place, comment, degree, also known as intensifiers, conjunctive, and several other subsets not shown here. Note that modern grammarians are reallocating many of the dustbin adverbs to other classes. The adverb to be analysed here is cautiously in my father drives very cautiously. Cautiously in this sentence can be defined semantically as describing how something is done, namely the driving, and functionally distributionally as following and modifying the verb drives. A formal description notes that cautiously is derived from the adjective cautious and identifiable as an adverb of manner by its ly ending. Cautiously in the example sentence is a member of the gradable and manner subsets. Note that very is also an adverb in the intensifier subset, and an example of how adverbs can modify other adverbs. Finally, here are example sentences containing adverbs in the major subsets. In a limited semantic definition, prepositions are said to indicate the location, direction, time, or manner of the noun that follows them. A functional definition points out that prepositions connect words to other parts of a sentence. Distributionally, prepositions come before nouns or pronouns as the head of a prepositional phrase. Prepositions do not change their form, that is, they don't inflect or accept affixes. Prepositions are an undisputed part of speech in all grammatical analyses, but some modern grammarians have increased the preposition class by reassigning to it words that traditionally have been assigned to one of the other classes. For example, the Cambridge Grammar of the English Language, CGEL, classifies as prepositions both home, traditionally an adverb, and because, traditionally a conjunction. Prepositions can be semantically subclassified as prepositions of time, location, direction, agency, manner, reason, participle, and comparison. Most prepositions are single words, but the last subcategory on the list here shows compound, also called complex prepositions. Note that many prepositions fall into more than one subset. For example, on is a preposition of both time and location. The preposition to be analysed is at in I live at the end of the street. At in the sentence can be defined semantically as denoting a place or position, and functionally distributionally as heading the phrase at the end of the street. Note that of in of the street is also a preposition. A formal description notes that the preposition at never changes. At in the example sentence is a member of the subset of prepositions that indicate location. Finally, here are example sentences containing prepositions in the major subsets. Determiners can be defined semantically as words that limit, indicate, or specify which noun, person, place, thing, or idea is being referred to. A functional distributional definition has them as words that introduce a noun phrase preceding any adjective present. A few determiners change form according to the grammatical person or number of the noun that follows them. For example, this book, these books. But in most cases there's no change of form. The determiner class is a new class. It does not feature as one of the 8 traditional word classes. It includes words that have previously been allocated to one of the other classes. Here are some examples of this reallocation. Some modern grammarians have proposed the term determinative as a useful additional lens through which to distinguish among the various types of determiner. Unfortunately, there is disagreement on which should be the class name and which the function name. This linguistic controversy will probably not interest most learners of English, but it is useful to be aware of the two terms. Determiners can be subclassified in various ways. The articles, possessive pronouns, demonstrative adjectives, interrogative pronouns, relative pronouns, quantifying adjectives, and numerals. Note that some determiners can combine in front of the noun, but in a set order. For example, it must be both my dogs, not my both dogs, and all the students, not the all students. The determiner to be analysed is her in Have you seen her cat? Her in this sentence can be defined semantically as standing for a noun, in this case a human female possessor. It precedes the noun and specifies the cat that the speaker is referring to. A formal description notes that the determiner has the form her, indicating the feminine gender of the cat's owner. Her in the example sentence is a member of the possessive pronoun subset of the determiners. Finally, here are example sentences containing determiners in the major subsets. Pronouns can be defined semantically as words that stand for or replace nouns that have already been mentioned or can otherwise be understood in the context. They can be defined functionally, distributionally, in the same way as nouns. That is, as words that can be the subject, object, or complement of a verb and occupy the same position as nouns. Some pronouns change their form according to the number, person, or gender of the noun that they stand for. Pronouns can be divided into numerous subsets: personal, possessive, reflexive, intensive, demonstrative, interrogative, relative, indefinite, and reciprocal. Pronouns are a disputed class. Some modern grammarians claim that they should be categorized as a subset of the noun class, since they perform the same functions and have the same distributional features. See the examples on this slide. I suspect, however, that most English language learners will find pronouns listed as a part of speech in their own right in the grammar resources they use. The pronoun to be analysed is him in Give Him My Love. Him in this sentence can be defined semantically as standing for or representing a noun, in this case obviously a male person. It functions as the indirect object of the verb give. A formal description notes that the masculine form is used since the person being referred to is a male. Him in the example sentence is a member of the personal pronoun subset. Finally, here are example sentences containing pronouns in the major subsets. A simplistic semantic definition of conjunctions is that they are joining words. Defined functionally, distributionally, they are words that connect other words, phrases or clauses to create larger and more complex phrases or sentences. Conjunctions never change their form. They are a disputed part of speech. Some modern grammarians claim that there is a case for splitting the conjunction class into two new classes, coordinators and subordinators. The major subsets of the conjunction class are the subsets that modern grammarians say are better understood as two different classes, namely coordinating conjunctions, coordinators, and subordinating conjunctions, subordinators. Most conjunctions are single words, but there are a few complex subordinating conjunctions and disjoined correlative conjunctions. Note that the CGEL classifies most of the traditional subordinating conjunctions as prepositions. The conjunction to be analysed is and in I play tennis and badminton. And in this sentence can be defined semantically as joining the two sports and giving them equal status. Functionally, and creates a single syntactic unit, in this case an object compound. A formal description notes that the conjunction and never changes. And in the example sentence is a member of the subset of the conjunctions that are called coordinators. Note that many English teaching resources use the acronym fanboys as a mnemonic for the coordinators, with the letter A representing and. Finally, here are example sentences containing conjunctions in the major subsets. The traditional semantic definition of an interjection is that it expresses an emotion or a sudden physical response of some kind. There is no sensible functional distributional definition of the interjection in a sentence, since it typically constitutes a sentence in its own right. Interjections may change form depending on the user's idiosyncratic idea of how to express the emotion or idea. Interjections are usually followed by an exclamation mark when written. Most modern grammarians recognize interjections as a part of speech in their own right. However, modern analyses do not restrict membership of the class only to the emotion words that typify the traditional classification approach. Furthermore, interjections have been renamed inserts by some modern grammarians. This slide has examples of the emotive words and of other word types that modern grammarians have added to the class. The interjection to be analysed is yuck in yuck, that's disgusting. Yuck can be defined semantically as expressing revulsion, for example, at something just tasted. It is difficult to give it a sensible functional definition as it stands alone. Like many interjections, yuck may change its form or pronunciation as users choose their own way of expressing the yuck sound. For example, as yuck or yuk. Yuck is a member of the subset of interjections that express a strong emotion or physical reaction. Finally, here are example sentences containing interjections in the major subsets. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. Okay, we've looked in some depth at the various parts of speech. Let's conclude this analysis with a higher level classification, namely into open and closed classes, also called the major or content classes and minor or function classes by some grammarians. The open classes are those classes to which new words are constantly being added. The closed classes are those classes to which new words are only very rarely added. Nouns, verbs, adjectives and interjections are the open classes. Here is a list with some recently added words in each case. Adverbs are also an open class, but I have not been able to find any that have been added in the 21st century. Note that existing words can take on new meanings in a different class. For example, to text a message or to stream a movie. Determiners, pronouns, prepositions and conjunctions are the closed or minor classes. They are also called the function classes as they are used to express the grammatical relationships between other parts of speech in the sentence. Since English already has the function words it needs to express grammatical relationships in every kind of sensible utterance and context, it's clear why the word classes listed here are considered closed. Pronouns are listed among the closed classes, but some new pronouns have been suggested to reflect the changing understanding of gender and identity in contemporary society. For example, the non-binary pronouns sie, hier, hers. It remains to be seen which, if any, of these new pronouns enter common usage and dictionaries, and whether, as a consequence, the pronoun class will be reclassified as an open class. Quiz page. Pause the video if you want to review the questions and answers before continuing. As you've seen throughout this lesson, there are disagreements among grammarians about various aspects of this topic, particularly in the correct part of speech classification of certain words. However, for language learners, correct usage is more important than classification and terminology. it makes no difference to most learners if, for example, skiing in I like skiing is a noun or a verb or a gerund. The important thing is to know that like can be followed by the ing form of the verb. Nevertheless, it is useful for language learners to know this basic grammar meta-language so they can make good sense of their English instruction either in class or in self-study. Furthermore, a basic knowledge of the parts of speech can be considered a necessary part of the general knowledge of every educated adult, whichever language they speak. Okay, you've now come to the end of this introduction to the parts of speech. Here is a summary of the important information about this grammatical topic. In the description below this video, you will find a link to the lesson index page shown on the left. As you can see, there are 4 ways to access the content, as well as a glossary and links to quizzes and more information on the topic.